Mr. Edison discovered Fort Myers, Florida in 1885 and returned the following year with his bride, Mina Miller Edison, to build a winter home on the banks of the Caloosahatchee River. By 1887, Mr. Edison had built his first laboratory on his Fort Myers estate, imported a steam engine and dynamo, and gave Fort Myers pioneer citizens their first taste of incandescent light. Mr. Edison referred to his visits to his Fort Myers retreat as working vacations, and from 1885 until his death in 1931, generally spent part of the year here in what he liked to call his adoptive home. Mr. Edison found our climate pleasant, and once told a reporter from the New York World, "The air here in Fort Myers is perfect, the weather is beautiful, and the days are a constant succession of blue skies and warm sunshine. And to all this, I owe a rapidly returned health." Late in life, Mr. Edison made a prediction that Lee Countyans, and especially pageant members, have come to believe is a prophecy come true.
There is only one Fort Myers, and 90 million people are going to find it out.
Edison, although deeply engaged in his work, took time off to visit with the young people of Fort Myers.
When I saw Mr. Edison, when I was at a birthday party down at the pier, and I can recall that he cut the cake, and all of us kids were out there having a big time, and he was carrying on and laughing, and so were we.
As the years passed, Mr. Edison's birthday party grew in importance. The celebration brought many famous people to Fort Myers who were privileged to claim friendship with the world's most famous wizard. Most notable among these guests were Henry Ford, who purchased property next door to the Edisons so that he and his great friend might enjoy working vacations together. Harvey Firestone was another frequent guest, and it was out of these birthday celebrations that the Edison Pageant of Light was born.
How did the pageant begin? Well, it took over from a celebration that had previously started in this town. A real estate promoter named Jimmy Crafton came to town. This was in 1928, and he staged a sun worshiper celebration. He did it as an event to draw attention to Fort Myers, which was a very small and unknown town in those days, and elected the first Sunshine King and Queen. The Sunshine Court couldn't last eventually because there were days when we had rain, and that messed up the tournament. So later on then, the Women's Community Club and the Junior Chamber of Commerce decided to restart the Sunshine Court, but they didn't want to make it the old Sunshine Court. They wanted to celebrate Thomas Alva Edison, and so they named it the Edison Pageant of Light and staged it that way. And so that was in 1938 that we started the Pageant of Light, and it's been very successful ever since.
After Mr. Edison's death in 1931, the people of Fort Myers held an annual memorial service to mark the anniversary of his birth. In 1938, Mr. Robert Halgrim, a personal friend of the great inventor and editor of the Fort Myers Press, suggested that a more elaborate tribute to the wizard take place annually.
Well, it started with Ronald Halgrim and a group of men who involved members of the then Junior Chamber of Commerce and the Women's Community Club. And the Women's Community Club, I believe, was organized in the beginning to entertain our winter visitors. They never affiliated with the Women's Federation or anything. They always wanted to do their own thing, and just in Fort Myers for the winter people. And this was something that a group of the very creative thinkers thought that would stimulate interest and business in Fort Myers to have a pageant honoring our famous citizen, Thomas Edison.
The first Edison Pageant of Light was held February 10th, 11th, and 12th of 1938. The first Edison pageant featured activities that included a jalopy derby, a street carnival, a cracker band contest, the annual memorial service, and a 3-mile-long, 7-band, 50-float parade. In addition to these events, the pageant also featured the young men and women of the community and a royal pageant that culminated in the crowning of a king and queen of the mythical realm of Edisonia. This tradition has survived the test of time and is the cornerstone of today's Edison Pageant of Light. In 1941, a baby parade was added to the list of community events featured in the three-day festival. Catherine Miller, the fourth Queen of Edisonia, remembers that the Edison Pageant was not strictly a social event. Her coronation took place at the Municipal Pier on the banks of the Caloosahatchee River.
I was crowned in February of 1941, and in December of 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. This interrupted our lives for the next 4 or 5 years until the war was over. Nobody felt like anything as superficial as a coronation or a queen of Edisonia. The whole thing just disintegrated because we were so intent on winning the war and doing our bit. As it turned out, my bit was to represent the community and any activities that they thought would draw a crowd to sell bonds or promote whatever was being promoted for the war effort. And of course, I was really glad to do this.
Victory in Europe and Japan set the celebratory mood as February 1946 marked the resumption of a revitalized, grander Edison Pageant of Light. Mrs. Thomas Edison, widow of the great inventor, was the honored guest of the pageant as it resumed for the first time since 1941. On February 9, 1946, the biggest crowd in its history thronged into Fort Myers for the Edison Pageant of Light parade. Throughout the 1950s, Charles Edison and his family remained dedicated friends of the pageant and returned year after year to crown its kings and queens. In 1959, the usually solemn Edison Memorial Service was transformed into a birthday party celebration. A local restaurant baked the first Edison birthday cake. It was a 7-tier, 300-pound creation, served free to everyone attending by lovely local young ladies, forevermore dubbed Cakeettes. The golden anniversary of the Edison pageant was celebrated in 1988. Queen Virginia Shepherd, the first Queen of Edisonia, was presented to pageant members along with all the living former royalty at a glowing 50th anniversary King and Queen's Ball. 1989 brought great change to the Edison pageant. In December of 1988, the pageant directors announced plans to create a separate non-profit organization called the Edison Festival of Light, which would oversee all the public events that were formerly sponsored by the pageant. The private social events, including the coronation and King and Queen's Ball, remained under the control of the Edison Pageant of Light. Despite this change, the pageant continued to be the major financial contributor to the newly created festival. With the Grand Parade of Light and other public events now conducted by the festival, the decade of the 1990s saw the pageant reach dazzling heights as it moved its events from the City Exhibition Hall to the state-of-the-art Harborside Convention Center. Today, the Edison Pageant and Edison Festival of Light coexist and are still guided by the inspiring example left by Thomas Alva Edison and his family. Over the years, growth and change have built on the solid foundation of our friendly small-town character. The story of the Edison Pageant of Light is the story of Fort Myers. From our roots in the dusty jousting contests on Tournament Street to the high-tech convention hall celebrations of today, the Edison Pageant of Light still reflects those qualities that make our town as appealing today as it was when Thomas Edison first came to us in 1885.